Okay, and as usual, we try to discuss the Pasha of the week based on the Rebbe's Siches and based on other things, and ultimately to wake ourselves up a little bit. Right, Moshe? Okay, the Pasha is a Pasha Teitse, as you all know. And what does the Pasha start with saying? Teitse la milchoma leivecha. When you'll step out to go to war against your enemies, and Hashem will render them into your hands. So there's an obvious question in this whole parsha. And this is something which is principle. If Hashem is going to render the enemy into your hand, why doesn't He eliminate the enemy before you go out to war?
From the beginning.
To start with. You have to go out, la milchoma, and face the enemy. And Hashem will render. You're not going to accomplish. You can't fight the enemy on your own. Hashem will do it for you. Let Him take care of him before. Finished. What is this all about? This whole Indian that you have to go out to war on your enemy. And then there's all kinds of different benefits from it and so forth. This Indian that our avodah, our life, has this as a principle that we constantly have to identify the enemy in our position, and we have to go out and fight him. And then Hashem helps and He eliminates them. And as a result of that, it says, B'shaviso shiviyoi. B'shaviso shiviyoi means that you then have the spoils from that war. You collect these spoils.
If you win.
If you win. You're bound to win. If Hashem is going to give you, an upper hand, of course you're bound to win. There are many aspects associated with this principle. In general, to start with, in our world, where everything is known by contrast. For instance, light. What is the identification of light? There is an opposite of darkness. Everything has a different color. You have black and you have white. You have blue and you have the green and yellow. All of these things denote different qualities. And these qualities are known by contrast. And ultimately, even good versus bad, good is also identified by contrast.
That means that you cannot have one without the other.
That's right. That's right. What is this about? Why this contrast, and what is the gain from this?
Choice.
I'm sorry?
Choice? Maybe.
Genius.
I'm not the only one saying it.
You snuck in on me. I didn't see you in the beginning. Had I known. One of the big things, and the principal thing, the principal gift that Hashem gave the human being in general and the Jewish people in particular, is the union of intelligence. You know, emotion, there are two principal factors in the human soul, the emotion and the intellect. These are the two levels, the two means by which the neshama, the soul, reveals itself in active life. Now, the emotion is focused on personal experience. A person feels comfortable or not comfortable. He loves or he hates. He likes or he dislikes. Likes and dislikes is also a neshama element, because it all comes, in other words, what does a person like? Things that are suitable for his neshama. And then what does he dislike? That which irks him, which goes against his grain. But this is all very, what's called subjective. Subjective means that this is limited to him, to his own experience. That which distinguishes a human being from everything else in the world, like we discussed last time, that the world was a complete world with everything in it before Adam Rishon, before the first man was created. Everything was in place, like we mentioned. Look in the Torah, the plants, the fowl, the fish, the animals, everything was in place. And yet the world had no significance, right? We discussed it last time. It has no value at all. It stood for nothing. That world, you couldn't say, oh, it's worth saving. There's nothing there to save. And you couldn't justify, what did God create over here? Just a world that starts, goes nowhere, and just an internal circle. A human being changes all that. The human being brings real significance, real value. And what is so significant of the human being? What did he bring to the world that made such a big change, made such a big difference? It is his awareness of that which is higher than the world. Where did the world come from? What does the world actually represent? And this is where the intellect comes in, because the emotion is also, so to speak, an internal experience of the human being. He feels one way, he feels the other way. It is in the intellect where he really recognizes, like the Rambam starts his Sefer, the Rambam begins with the words, and the Rambam, I don't have to quote it, I'll just say it in translation, that the foundation of all wisdom is to know that there is a first being that brings everything into existence. In other words, deep down in the individual's wisdom is implanted that recognition as part of the wisdom of man, that the world didn't begin from world. The world began from a first being that precedes it all. And as a result of this fact that it begins from a first being, Therefore, everything in the world has an element of the first being, has an element of his truth. That's what the Rambam says. That everything, Ma'amitis Himotzi, the truth of his presence, this is what's promulgated later on in the entire creation. It expanded, extended, expressed. And as a result of that, the world acquires a real significance. It has an element, a godly element, an element of truth, an element of real truth, real value. This is recognized in the intellect. The way step back a moment. The intellect, like we all know, that even though you open up a book and you start learning, and once you learn it, you say, oh, it makes sense. Oh, that's... If it makes sense, how come you didn't think of it before? When you learn something, whatever you learn, after you learn it and you debate it and say, oh, yeah, that really makes sense. Why did you have to learn it? Why did you not think of it yourself? Genius, what's the reason for that?
Because we already knew it, but we don't remember it. Our soul knows it, but we have to bring it out. It's not that we learn it, we bring it back from God.
So how come we don't? That's right. So what? One of these two stages. This is important to understand.
What's the two stages? Oh, you mean when we don't know it, and then when we? That's right. Why then?
We don't know it, but we know it, right?
What do you mean? Why do we forget it?
We don't forget it. See, this is the point. I'd like you to listen. The real depth and purity of the intellect and the real value that is put so much stock in the intellect. And we know at the same time the intellect can also mislead you, as we see it in the world. We concoct all kinds of theories that are completely contrary to the truth, contrary to anything good. And it's all based on the intellect. The real principle of the intellect is that the intellect has an insight of a truth that, as I said before, is beyond world. Intellect recognizes, this is what's called in Chassidus, you've learned Chassidus a little bit, what's called in Chassidus the Chochmah. There is Chochmah level in the intellect, and there's the Bina level in the intellect. Bina is the debatable, the logic aspect of the intellect. But prior to Bina, at a much deeper, much purer level, is that level that's called the insight, the chokhmah. The chokhmah is where a person, because of the blessing of intellect, knows the truth without any definition. He knows that there is a truth beyond world. He knows that there is a first being without the need of proving it. Because that's where the truth is hidden. That knowledge is at so to speak, at a level in his own intellect, at the level that he cannot, in the conscious thinking, identify. He knows it. but he can't really define it and identify it. There's an interesting Gemara. It's a medrash, actually, Gemara. Gemara says like this. If the Torah were not given to us, Chas v'Shalom, Hashem would never have given us a Torah. There are, you know that in the Torah there are mitzvahs, there are three general categories of mitzvahs. The category of mitzvah is called mishpatim, which means civil laws. Then there is eidos, testimonials. To remember it is Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, testimonials. And then there is chukim, there is decrees, which are godly decrees that we don't necessarily are capable of understanding it, such as you can't mix wool and linen in the same garment. Okay, that doesn't lend itself to simple logical explanation. But the first category, which is called mishpatim, simple human laws of behavior, these are things that lend themselves easily to be understood. And the Gemara says that if the Torah were not given, we would have learned even principles of ethics, principles of proper behavior from animals. As for instance, tznius, you know, the principle of being clean, of not exposing myself from the cat. Can you compare a cat to a human being? Can you imagine a human being learning from a cat? And then there are other animals that have all kinds of different qualities, like the Gemara said that an esher, an eagle has a natural mercy for its young, has love for its young. It's a natural thing in an eagle. And other animals have all kinds of different fine qualities. And then Moses says, yeah, and the human being would learn from them. That sounds like a pretty nasty insult. The human being has to learn from the cat. What is the explanation for this? That when a human being observes the cat behaving in a certain way, he will not merely pick it up. Oh, the cat is doing it, I should also do it. He will not be mimicking the cat. What happens is that this strikes him intellectually. He says, hey, this looks nice. And then he contemplates not just it looks nice, it sounds right. And because it sounds right, that's why he adopts it. Not because he's copying the cat. Why does it sound right? For instance, the principle of tznius. The cat has it, not cleanliness or whatever. The cat has it, this is a natural instinct. Where does it come to? How does a human being look at it? Is it similar to that which a cat, a natural instinct? There's a profound difference. Because of his intellectual insight, that he knows that he is constantly in the presence of this first being. So he sees cleanliness as, yeah, in the presence of the first being, the presence of God, I should be clean. I should look decent. And I shouldn't be exposed. In other words, all of these qualities, a human being acquire a totally different significance, different meaning. Except that even though deep down he knows this truth, that he's in the presence of the first being, of the true being of God, but to translate this in practical things in the world, for that he needs to learn. How does that to be translated in the physical world. And that he can learn, that the cat strikes, oh, cleanliness seems right. And such other things. But essentially, when he picks it up, he's not picking it up on the basis of a natural instinct, but he's picking on the basis of his intellect, that this is a right thing to do because of the truth, of the godly truth. I want to expand slightly on this Indian. The truth is, where do animals, how come animals have a natural, decent instincts? Like the eagle has the instinct of love of care for his young. The cat has sneers, the gomel, the camel has all kinds of different, any animal all the animals have their particular nature, and some of them are very decent, very nice. The dog is called the man's best friend because the dog is dedicated to its master. It's a dog, you know. A dog by us is like an insult. You know, you're a dog, right? But a dog has quite beautiful qualities. Where did this come from? Where did these qualities come from? Everything in the world was created by God. And everything in the world was created by different attributes, divine attributes. And this is why every animal has a certain attribute, naturally, which created it, which it was imbued by. You know, this is the attribute from which it stemmed, from which it was created. So that the nesher, the eagle, was created with the attribute of mercy, and so forth. In other words, this is all stemming from the godly force, the truth that created these animals. But they were given that nature. The human being also has to reveal and bring these qualities out, but he brings it out by recognizing the godly presence directly and saying, yes, that is a good quality, that's a correct thing, and so forth. And this is why the human being, he does not know anything unless something strikes, something alerts him to this element, to this quality. And without that, you would not be able to, there isn't an instinctive element. Like we discussed also, I believe last week, the phenomenon that a human baby, right, takes a year to learn to stand up on his feet, whereas an animal, a half an hour after it's born, boom, he's jumping around, running around. And the difference is precisely this. Because a human being, everything he does has to go through his intellect. It has to make sense. It has to come from his recognition of the godly presence. Therefore he says, yes, to stand up on the feet, that's a very wise thing. The animal does it instinctively. Doesn't know the difference. Was given that instinct and he does it. Because of this, that by a human being everything has to relate back to his awareness, to godly awareness. This is why the only way that he becomes aware of things, and practically on the worldly level, is through this contrast. When he sees good and he sees evil, then he says, this is godly and this is counter-godly. Then he is able to identify it. Without this contrast, nothing will alert him to it, and he will remain, so to speak, aloof. It will not be translated in his godly awareness cannot be translated on a practical worldly level. This is really embedded in the human being himself. As you learned, in a person the enemy is not necessarily an enemy, an outside enemy. We all possess the entire structure right inside ourselves. We have a Yetzer Tov, we have a Yetzer Hara. We have a Yetzer, we have something that formulates ideas towards good and something that formulates ideas towards evil, called Yetzer Hara. Why do we have a Yetzer Hara? We're supposed to be good, not bad. Without the Yetzer Hara, only with the Yetzer Tov, we would be perfectly good. But our good would not carry this human significance. It would be the same good as that of the eagle. It would not be a good that represents our awareness that why are you good? Because you live in God's world. There's a godly presence. You're in the presence of this first being. The whole purpose of the human being coming into the world, and how come the human being made this big change and significance in the world, is because of this awareness. Because he came to represent and say, remember what's going on in this world. This is not just about being naturally good. The Gemara says that Odom Rishon, the first man, when he first created, when he was created and he opened his eyes, he looked around, the whole world was under ready. Everything was ready before him. He looked around and he saw all the animals, and he looked around, why are you standing doing nothing? You're supposed to say praise to the Creator. They didn't know what he's talking about. Everyone else have their natures. That's what he said. The Gemara said that Odom Rishon, the first thing he did, he got up and he said, he called up, in those days there was communication somehow between men and the animals, and he says, we should all come and praise our Creator. Each one for his qualities that Hashem has blessed him with, and for the beauty of the world that he has put him into. So this is the principle of what the human being is, how the human being, as I said, changes the entire spectrum of the world and gives the world a real significance and a justification for existence. It is because of this intellect, because of his awareness and recognition that everything comes from this pure, true first being. And this is why God has embedded in the human being these two contrasts, these two sides, the good and the bad. It is in order to facilitate, in order to enable the human being to translate everything that he does on the good side in a true goodness, in a godly goodness, not just instinctive, natural goodness, but true godly goodness. So that when he recognizes internally to himself, just one briefly, when he recognizes internally to himself a tendency let's say he has a tendency to get angry. We all know angry is not a good quality. Okay? What does it mean to him that it's not a good quality? Does it mean to him it's not a good quality because if I get angry, people are not going to like me? I'm not going to be able to make friends. It's not a good quality to the human being means that this is offensive to the truth that exists in the world, to the godly truth. This is what it means. The Gemara says, listen to this, Kol hakoyes kilu oived avodah zarah. When one gets angry, is tantamount to idol worship. What's the relationship? He's angry. What's the relationship to Oived Avodah Zarah? There are many different explanations, but in context of what we discussed, there's a very simple understanding. It's an offensive quality, and in the presence in a godly presence, in presence of the purity and greatness and the richness of the world that God created, and its creator, it's offensive to get angry. You have a problem, deal with it in a practical and a productive way. You've learned a couple of days ago, the Shir Tanya. I'm sure you all said the Shir Tanya. The Shir Tanya of Chitas was a Perik Yud Aleph in the Igris Kodesh, not the Rebbe. Laskil Chubino. So briefly, what the Alter Rebbe explains in that, this was like I think Shabbos, but the Alter Rebbe explains in that Igeres is that it is incumbent upon us. Incumbent means it is duty bound. We should recognize this as a duty, as an obligation, to recognize that everything comes into the world directly from Hashem. And if it comes directly from Hashem, then it cannot possibly be bad. Therefore, whatever comes is an inherent good, and if we don't recognize it, it's because we fail to recognize its goodness. Therefore, if one is angry, one is offending this principle. He's saying, everything comes from Hashem. No, there is Avodah Zarah. It comes from other source. If it's not good, it doesn't come from Hashem. That's Avodah Zarah.
It says 4 types of people in Pirkei Avos, and all 4 of them get angry. All the types of people. Slow or quick. Either slow to anger or quick to anger, and slow to calm or quick to calm. But they all get angry. And that's all. Right.
So the 4 types of people find the principle of whatever qualities we talk about, anger or whatever other qualities, it's one principle we have to remember. Since we're blessed with a good side and with a bad side. We have a Yetzer Tov, a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is always going to respond instinctively.
Right.
The fact that we get angry instinctively, that's not an affront. That we don't talk about it. You get angry instinctively, that's a response. No, it can be confronted for that. But if you allow it to develop and you hold on to it and you keep this angry and you want to act upon it, that's when you are in the wrong. That's when you become offensive. Anything that happens instinctively is not is not the issue that we're dealing with. Once your intellect sets in and you see I'm angry, and you say, hey, how can I be angry in Hashem's world, in the presence of God, and it doesn't stop you from being angry, that is when you have to answer for it. This is where it becomes offensive. So this was just one little illustration. The important thing to understand from this entire discussion is that in fact we have both sides. We have an inclination towards bad and an inclination towards good. I don't think anyone here needs specifics in terms of inclination towards bad and inclination towards good. Everybody is confronted with all kinds of challenges. And sometimes we feel frustrated. We feel overwhelmed. You know, we have to fight such a you never do? You have to fight such discomfort, and we have to kind of, it seems to us that this is our natural inclination. And so why? Why do we have this? We have to understand that this is the godly plan. Because only by recognizing this, only by confronting ourselves, confronting the enemy, and recognizing, hey, this is an enemy. This is the guy within myself that would tend to blind me, to make me oblivious to the truth, oblivious to the godly presence, to be oblivious to the human message in the world, and to follow rather the animalistic tendency, and to follow, so to speak, my instinct. This is a true enemy. And this is why the Torah clearly states that part of our life, part of the human life, part of the process to conquer your land and to settle, to create a Jewish land, to settle and to create a Jewish world, will involve, say, going out to war on the enemy. Because this war is not merely me versus him. It's not one instinct versus the other instinct. I like this, you like this. This is a war that is conducted on the basis of recognizing the human, the godly truth versus that which opposes it. Thus, this is what the whole Tanya really is based on. That every time that we have any kind of challenge from this enemy, from our instinct, from our left side, we have to recognize that to counter this, we counter it by recognizing, and by intellect, by recognizing the truth that we represent. What is the meaning of our lives? Is it just the comfort of the instinct, the instinctive life, like the animal? Or is our life represent the consciousness of the godly presence? That's what the human being is about. This is the difference between the emotion and the intellect. The emotion simply says, I like or I don't like. Pleasant or not pleasant. The intellect speaks on a different level. The intellect speaks on a level right or wrong. And on a higher level, true or false. And when it comes to, this is the level at which we conduct our battles. So that when you have an internal battle, the real question is not do I like it or I don't like it. The real question is what is the truth? What is the right and what from the wrong? And if we can live up just even one moment to recognizing the truth versus the falsehood, the godly truth versus the falsehood of the world, that satisfies and fulfills our purpose in the world. This is what we stand for. This is what the human being is about. And this is why the Torah says, you go out to war on your enemy. Who wants war? Who wants war? I want to be in peace with everybody. Of course we want peace. But if there's an enemy who disregards the truth for which you stand, then this is made for the purpose of arousing in you the recognition this truth. Otherwise, you would not recognize it in this world. The neshama would know about it, but here in this world, you wouldn't know about it. Just like the very simple qualities we have to learn from animals, the tznius and so forth. Okay, so this is the principle just of this posuk. And as always, we want to come back and kind of translate it in a realistic, in a functional level for ourselves. From daybreak, from the beginning of the day, we are constantly challenged with small war or a big war. Wake up in the morning, right? Everybody knows already there's a war. Wake up in the morning. Big war. Big war. Yeah, it's a big war, you say? Okay. Now, what is this war about? This is what I'm trying to point out. This is a real war. This is not, am I going to make it to the state in time, or am I going to get a lashing from Rebbe Lipsker? You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
That's a terrible one, right? This is, we are all adults. This is a real challenge. This is why when we wake up in the morning, what is the first thing we have to say? The first thing we say is, Hashem has restored the neshama to us. The first thing in the morning when we wake up, we become aware of this principal truth. You woke up, this is not a natural phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that represents a godly presence, and that God has restored the neshama. This is how we wake up. And then there is the enemy that says, forget about it. You woke up, it's a natural thing, and you're still tired, you still have to go to sleep, and so on. Or you're lazy, it doesn't mean necessarily you're tired, you're lazy, whatever it is. This is a real enemy of what we stand for. And it is important that we recognize, we reflect on this. What is the distinction between the human being and the animal? The animal does things by instinct. The human being does things with intellect. Every aspect of his life is an intellect. When he wakes up in the morning, what happened over here? I'm just tired from sleeping. What made you wake up? In the human life there is a reality, a continuous reality in this life. And anything that challenges that is a challenge to this reality. So if I woke up, that means that now my neshama was restored, and now I have a duty, I have my shlichus, I have my mission. And anything that interferes with that is my enemy. It's trying to drag me into an opposite, in a subhuman life. And sometimes we have to oppose this enemy like an enemy. So, this is not something that, this is one instinct, another instinct. One is my friend and one is my enemy. And only by this clear identification do we come to recognize the truth of what we stand for. Otherwise, there is the demarcation line, demarcation, the separation between friend and foe, it becomes blurry. You know what becomes blurry? It's not clear because, I prefer this. I said I would prefer to be on time, so I said I don't have any problems from Rabbi Lipskin. That's not what we stand for over here. We are all adults. We have been preparing for a life, for a great future life. We have to be able to stand on our feet with some kind of a meaning in life. Yeah.
You said we should, sometimes we need to oppose the enemy like an animal?
Mm-mm.
Or sometimes we don't, we shouldn't?
No.
You're saying fighting one instinct with the
I
other?
don't know what you're quoting. It says, we have to recognize the enemy as an enemy.
Oh.
And oppose him as an enemy, not as an animal.
Whatever. Right.
You have to understand that, in fact, the other side, in other words, we have the human side, the intellectual side, we have the other side. The other side is really an instinctive, animalistic tendency. That's called nefesh habahami, the Alter Rebbe calls it. It's the animal nefesh in the human being. He's not interested on that score. He doesn't have this cognizance that there is a truth, a significant, and a difference between the human being and the animal. He does what he likes to do, and this is the enemy of the human side. The more clearly we identify this distinction, that this is the human side and this is the animal side, and that this is a friend and this is a foe, the closer and the clearer will become our human perspective. This is the important thing. The clearer will become our realization, hey, what do I stand for? What is the real significance, meaning of my life? Is it just instinctive, or is it intellectual, or is it true? And the difference between these two is really a vast difference. Interesting, you're learning Tanya. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya basically what he calls the intermediate person. There's a tzaddik and there's a Rosha, and in the middle there is the Beinani, the immediate person. It's classed in the Beinani at great length, with all kinds of different situations and so forth. And he says that this intermediate person, who is a perfect individual, as they call him, that the Alter Rebbe describes, he does everything right. He never does anything wrong. That's what a Beinoni is. If he does something wrong, the Alter Rebbe says he's already not a Beinoni, he's a Rosh. He never does anything wrong. He's a perfect person. But if he does everything perfectly, not on the basis of his awareness of his godly service, without any battle, but just because of habit, even if it's a habit that he created. He got used to doing something the right way, and it became habitual, and there's no problem. He does everything right. But in the practical sense, he has no challenge. He follows his habit. Already, he's not really doing his duties.
He's not doing what?
His duties. It's not the godly service. The godly service is when he is aware, and he is constantly, so to speak, bringing out new arsenals, new strength from being aware of the godly purpose, of the godly presence. This is what what the Torah is saying. In our lives, we always have an enemy. We have to identify him as an enemy, and we have to stand up and fight him. And that way, we bring out our human quality. That way, we fulfill our purposes, and we transform the world. And this is actually the way, the Muhammad that brings about the Geula and Mashiach. Mashiach has to be the last word in our talks, right? This is how it's accomplished. By revealing the godly presence. And as we explained many, many times recently, that is what the human being stands for. This is what distinguishes the human being from the animal. May be perfect and beautiful and wonderful. The birds sing and the human being sings. And the birds sing beautifully, right? And we record their singing. Is there a difference between human beings singing and the bird singing?
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a difference. There has to be a difference. And one way that this difference is identified, and one way this difference surfaces, is through this contrast. That he will not succumb to instinct. He will maintain a perspective of right from wrong and good from bad. So Hashem should help all of us. This is Chayda Shalom, preparation for the new year, preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. And we should collect ourselves and get a clear picture of who we are and what it means that we come to Rosh Hashanah, and in Rosh Hashanah we are instrumental in coronating God as King of the world. You will still learn about it, but that's what it is. Okay.
We should not succumb to our,
I'm sorry?
we should not succumb to our
Instinct.
and maintain our perspective, but like have an instinct. So.
Not instinct. So not succumb to our instinct, but have a perspective of right from wrong and good from bad, true from false.